You call us to abide in you, the vine where life begins. Through every branch your love flows deep, transforming from within. Rooted in your promise, Lord, we seek to bear good fruit. A thriving faith, a vibrant grace, our lives in you made true.
Welcome to the This Is How We Thrive podcast, episode number 1. So glad to be with you. I'm Irv White, your host, joined alongside our Bishop Cynthia, Fierro, Harvey. Thank you so much for being here. And the Reverend Thea Curry-Fuson. Thank you both for joining us. We're going to talk today about a lot of things, but primarily about, first of all, why are we doing a podcast? What is the intent? What do we want to do? I would think we would want churches to be able to go, grow, and glow more in the marvelous and matchless name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And so, Bishop, first of all, welcome. Thank you so much. You are a busy lady these days.
Well, I am. I'm burning the roads, but it's all good and exciting. It's great reasons to burn the roads these days.
So, obviously, you're a bishop of the Texas Annual Conference. For those of you who don't know that, you're also the bishop of the Rio Texas Conference, which means you are burning up and down I-10.
I-10 and all the other places in between, that roads I didn't know existed.
Have you stopped by the Buc-ee's? Do you stop by Buc-ee's? Okay.
Yeah, great. Buc-ee's. You know, I've kind of learned the right time to stop at Buc-ee's. You don't stop at Buc-ee's at like noon, but you could stop at 2 and it's better. But it is great, and almost every road I'm on these days, there's a Buc-ee's.
So why did you want to do a podcast?
You know, I thought that a podcast, and it's really been a dream for me, it's a great way to really relate story and to amplify people's voices and what God is doing in our midst, which I think is sometimes buried, right? Because there's so many great things that are happening. We can't possibly tell all the stories, but then there's certain stories that lead to the next story. And my hope is that as people listen in and they hear what God might be doing in this part of the conference, they're thinking, gosh, you know, we could do that too.
We can do that too.
We could do that too. And so how do we amplify the goodness of God in all the places that we live, work, and play? And I think this is an organic, natural way to do it. People can listen in while they're walking, running, drinking a cup of coffee in the morning, or in the car as they travel. So I think it reaches people in a lot of different ways.
Well, Thea, you're the vet around the table. You're all over the place when it comes to podcasts. So how do you see this going? And, what is your perspective on what you anticipate this podcast to do?
Yeah, I just want to first say I'm really excited to be here. I'm excited that our conference is taking this step and trying something new. I'm currently serving as an associate pastor at First United Methodist Church Pearland, and there my hope and goal is to really reach those who don't come to church. Dreaming and deciding and finding ways to reach those people. I'm also a published author, which is also a goal to reach people who are not coming to church with the good news. And I currently lead 2 podcasts. So we host Real Talk, FUMC podcast, which is a place where we have real conversations with real people about faith, doubt, and everything in between. I run that with our church. And then I also run my own podcast called She Leads, which is a place we have conversations about leadership, faith, and relationships from a woman's perspective. And the thing about podcasting is it meets people where they are. We are on our phones. Let's just accept it. It's our reality. We are just as, guilty of that. And again, when they're in their cars, they're doing chores, they're just taking a minute to break. Doing a podcast creates a way that we can reach them with honest and real conversations. It's also where our world is now. We are so over marketed to and edited, and everyone has a kind of fake persona that they're offering, but podcasting is real conversations. People want a longer form of storytelling. They want to hear real perspectives. They want to get to know the people. And so podcasting is a great place we can do that. And when it comes to faith, we get to reach people with our good news. I think the United Methodist Church is the most prime for 2025. Our gospel of inclusivity and just immaculate, never-ending love, we have got to get this out to the world and let them share it. And so I'm excited. I'm excited that we're taking this opportunity.
Well, and I'll just say, I got to be a guest on the podcast, and it was a fun day of just storytelling and sharing what was on our mind, and it was in the moment, which I think is another thing that podcasts can do, is it's in the moment. What is happening right now? You don't have to wait till tomorrow, right? If something happens in the world, we can come into this podcast studio and record something and put it out today. So I think there's just something about that relevant, real-time kind of what's happening in our worlds, particularly in a time where the good news needs to be heard. So I just think that was the beauty of what we got to do together. And so thank you, because you've actually given us some direction and your thoughts and input and insight into what we're trying to do today. So thank you.
And by the way, I'm the one at the table with no podcast experience. So it's great to be surrounded by these professionals. But I'm amazed at some of the statistics that in 2022, 100 million active podcast listeners in the United States. And then in 2023, it went up 50 million. So people are listening. People are driving, they're walking, they're listening, they're tuning in to podcasts, and not just to be entertained, but to be informed. Yeah. And think that's what we want to do here, is to inform people.
And don't sell yourself short. You might not be a podcaster, but you're a storyteller.
Oh, well,
so
thank you.
You're
Thank
a great
you,
storyteller. So don't sell yourself
All
short.
right. Well, thank you, Bishop. So listen, what should we expect to learn during these episodes?
My hope is that curiosity will be prompted as we hear the stories, not just insider stories, but the stories from the margins, the stories from the people that we get to serve with. How are we impacting other people's lives? Because we can talk about ourselves all day long. We're really good at that. But how do we engage the people that we get to serve alongside with in these kind of conversations? And what are we learning from them? And how do we amplify that voice that might not ever be heard? Right? Because I think that's that's another piece of our current reality, is that there's a lot of voices that are silenced. So how do we bring those into the room, into the space, so that we could hear how God is working in and around people's lives? I mean, the biblical story is being retold today, every day, in the lives of people. So how do we connect back the biblical story to today's story of how God is at work in the lives of people?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I know the purpose of doing a podcast would be to improve or increase your brand, or make your brand known. Bishop, what is the brand of the United Methodist Church?
I think now we're back to, our rootedness in what it means to be a Wesleyan United Methodist. What does it mean to love your neighbor? Plain and simple. And that doesn't mean just the people next door. So if we were to brand that, we talk about, we make disciples for the transformation of the world. That is our mission statement. But what does that look like? And that's the piece I'm trying to work on, is the why. Why do we do that? We don't just do that to count people. Okay, we've transformed another person. That's not the intent here. The intent is, how are we deeply rooted in changing the lives, not just of people, but the communities that we get to serve. So I'm working right now. We're all working on Thrive in this annual conference, and that's kind of becoming an organic brand, if you will. It started off as an application for a Lilly Endowment grant. And then Thrive kind of created its own legs and skin, and now it's really living itself out in the conference, which was our hope. But there's been more unintended consequences of that we did not expect. And that's one beauty, I'll just say for a minute, about Lily and the work that they do is not only do they want to hear the stories of how their money that they've invested in us is working, but they want to know what are the unintended consequences of this work? Where is it changing other people along the way? So Thrive, clarity, witness, abundance, kinship, joy. How is that living itself out, not just in the parish project, but how is that living itself out in the life of the annual conference? And when I hear people talk about one of those markers, it's like, okay, yes, it's working. This is what we had hoped for. And it's actually more than we had hoped for.
Well, you talked about being Wesleyan, and I think those markers, I don't think a lot of people, they say, well, I'm a United Methodist, but I don't know that they understand how to be Wesleyan. Or I think those markers are the things that really make us Wesleyan, so to speak.
Right.
Well, and I wonder if it isn't being able to give people the space to tell that story. So I was just thinking, in the worship service that I lead in Pearland, I'm really big about inviting various voices to share. And some take me up on it, first time ever, stand up on a Sunday morning and tell their testimony or be a part of a witness panel. But many are like, no way, I would never. And yet a podcast creates a space where you can have those conversations. And so as I think about, our brand and who are we, this is going to give us an opportunity to share that story, to tell the world, or even just our neighbor who is not going to come to church, but will listen to us on a podcast, right? We'll be excited to hear that, so that more and more people understand what it is to be United Methodist, what it is to have a Wesleyan faith, what it means to thrive as a believer today in 2025, when the world has a lot of reason to doubt and worry and fear, and it doesn't feel like faith is something on the rise. And yet we get to share that story. We get to show also how faith is making a difference. That's the number one question I get from young people and unchurched. Why would I go to church? How is it going to help me? How is it going to make a difference in the world? We get an opportunity to share those stories, to talk about the real joy, the real kinship, the way that witnesses are living out their faith every single day in the real world. And so I think this is a perfect opportunity in the space to really share that so that people would know.
So does one size fit all when it comes to thriving? Every church can thrive.
Every church can thrive. And here's what we've heard. That thrive, clarity, witness, abundance, kinship, joy, that works, that plays in Peoria, the old saying goes, that can play in a large church, that can play in a small rural church, that really does. And that was really the part that when we were talking about it at first, that resonated with me when somebody said, oh, that would work in my small church. And then somebody said that would work at my big church. And so I think it is something that really can resonate everywhere. And when we think about John Wesley's ministry, when it thrived is when he left the church building and went out into the communities and preached the gospel. You hear we've all heard those stories. And so if we're going to talk about it in those terms of being good Wesleyan Methodists, really was when John Wesley stepped out of the church building and preached on his father's grave, right? Because that was the place where he could reach the people, the coal miners, all the people that would have never stepped foot in the church building. So I'm wondering if a podcast environment might be that for us today.
Yeah, I heard a story. I'm going to mess it up a little bit, but they were talking about, there was a time when, folk were in the church, within the concrete walls of the church, and people outside would knock on the door, let me in, let me in. And now the people are knocking on the door, telling the church to come out, to bring the sanctuary to the streets. And I think that is, I think this is, the timing is so right for this, because I think we have a community, the least, the last, the lost, people are out there begging the church, please come come and share what you have with us. We're so busy maybe trying to woo people in, but we need to get out more, and we need to find those stories, find those people, and help them connect to the gospel.
I don't think it's by accident that Jesus had to go back to the upper room twice and tell his followers to go. What are you still doing locked behind these doors? I am alive. Go and tell this story. Take my spirit with you. I'm with you. You can do this. This is a rented room. You need to move on and get out there and share the gospel. And I try and hold on to that whenever we get so stuck inside of our doors, inside of the way that we've always done things, to say, that's right. Jesus had to come back twice and say, go. And so
I have a friend that says Jesus said, go into all the world, not go into the church. And so I think about that all the time. And, this also has become very real for me. And we've got great churches doing great things. But if you go down to a shout out here to Central in Galveston with Michael Ginger, when you go there, he brings his people in to tell the story. So it's not Michael Ginger telling you what's happening at Central. The community's telling their own story. And there's just something super powerful about that. And so how do we amplify the story of the people that we're actually neighboring?
Well, I'm hopeful that, this again creates an opportunity. A podcast creates that space where you can bring in those who have stories of transformation that is ongoing, and create a safe place for them to share that, and be able to just let the world know that the transformation is still happening. The gospel is still at work in real people, real, regular, flawed people over and over again.
And every story, Bishop, is a great story because it's their story. Sometimes I think we want to minimize. No, your story is not like my story, but man, I have a great story. I do. I think about a gentleman at our church, Gary DeCure. He would come every once in a while. A young lady would bring him. He'd sit there. Some Sundays he was there, some he wasn't. Next thing I know, I see Gary's greeting. He's greeting folk at the door. So now he's a greeter. And then the next thing I know, we allow our congregation, certain members of the congregation, to lead the affirmation of faith. I look up one Sunday, Gary's leading the affirmation of faith. What a great transformation story for a guy who wasn't coming to church, now comes to church, and now is serving in church and making a difference. To me, those are the transformation stories that I know are just run rampant throughout the conference.
And there's stories like that will never get told. So I think the other thing about a podcast is I hope that these aren't stories that you're going to read in the newspaper or whatever, in the news, even on your news feed on social media. These aren't those stories. It's the stories that aren't told, like the fellow you just referred to. So where are those stories that are not being told that the average person out there will say, wow, it just touches your heart. I don't know if we're supposed to name names on this podcast or not, but I'm going to name them. I'm a big Steve Hartman fan from CBS because he finds he tells great stories, and he finds the story, the building named after the lady that worked in the cafeteria, was a recent one. And he tells those stories, heart stories, that you're not going to read about in the New York Times. But how do we find, and I think that's going to be our challenge, is to actually not to find the stories, because I think there's plenty, is which ones to tell, right? Because we've got so many great things like that. But those stories that might not ever get told anywhere else, is this the place for them to be told?
So how did you come up with Thrive? What is the origin there?
Oh gosh. Okay. So you'd have to talk to Brandy Horton on one of the next podcasts to really fill you in. But they looked at, I think it's Harvard that's done a study on thriving communities. And that's where somebody said, well, maybe we ought to look at that. And that's where that began. And so that's kind of the birthplace of of the word thrive, and also the markers. What are words that describe thriving communities, and in our case, not just thriving churches, but thriving communities? Because while I am interested, and it would be heresy if I said it any other way, I'm interested in people being in our churches. But I'm really interested in how our churches can change the communities that we serve. That to me is the gospel. The church kind of, what was that old saying? The church is a filling station for us to go out into the world. And so, and I think Thrive does that when you talk about, are we clear about who we are? Are we being a witness of the gospel of Jesus Christ? Are we looking at, do we really believe that all I have needed, thy hand has provided? Do we want to sit at table with people, not just feed them? Right? Like, I want to hear your story while I share a sandwich with you. And then joy, because we all know, the three of us know in a church, people can smell joy 1,000 miles away or not, right? I've been in churches, certainly not any in the TAC or the Rio, Texas conference, but where there's no joy. But the minute you walk in a church, when I walk into your two places, there is joy. There is joy. You can feel it, taste it, smell it. So, and joy, I think, is a byproduct, maybe. So when we launched Thrive, we had the launch day, and we started with joy because we believe that when you're clear, you're a good witness, you look at things in abundance, you're going to offer kinship to those around. Maybe joy is a result of those other things. So I think that's, to me, that's exciting. That's why Fresh Expressions is exciting, because it really is about not just the people in the building on Sunday morning. It's what do we do the other 6.5 days of the week? What do you do when you go to work on Monday? Who are you? Do people sense that you're different? Maybe you're being a witness. You're not just preaching the witness, but you're being the witness, right?
You talked about, obviously you want not just you personally, obviously, the church to thrive, but the community to thrive. And I remember one of the things I read in, I think it was Tom Rainer wrote a book, Post-Quarantine Church, I think is the title of it. But he talked about you don't just want to be a church in the community. You want to be a church for the community. I think that is so important. For churches to do that. Do you agree? Yeah.
I read a book about St. Mary's of the Field in London, which is, 300-year-old church, stone cathedral in downtown London with 100 people worshiping there. And so they are not paying their own bills. And the leadership looked and said, when we close our doors very soon, this neighborhood won't even notice, except because it'll turn into a fun coffee shop or bar or whatever. And so they started to dream and said, how can we serve our community? How can we really build kinship with our neighbors and connections? And so they took their huge space and turned it into an event center. They had beautiful acoustics, naturally. They upgraded their audio and visual equipment. And now, though that place still worships with about 100 people on Sunday morning, every single day of the week, including Sunday evenings, there is an event there. It's a musical showcase. It's a speaker panel. There's poetry readings. And it's now become a place in the community that everyone knows and loves. It's filling a real need of a place to have culture, to have conversations, to be able to gather together. They've expanded and said, well, we also should offer a coffee shop. We should also offer this kind of store. Like, serve our community with what they need and want. And through that, we are being authentic witnesses to the gospel. We're employing people with and without faith. We're coming alongside. We're building those relationships. We're, again, creating a safe space. And not only are they not going to have to close their doors because they're now able to fund their huge old building, but the community would be at a loss. The community would rally up and say, no, what do we have to do to save St. Mary's of the Field? And I just continue to hold on to that and say, how can we do the same? How can we make sure that our churches, one, don't have to close, but two, that the community would notice and they wouldn't allow it. They would rally up. They would say, what do you need, so that we can keep this viable resource in our community that is concerned way more with the health and the wellness of our community than how many people they can get to come to worship.
Wow. So programming note, we will have a fresh episode the first Tuesday of every month. What kind of conversations, Bishop, should our audience expect to hear in the months to come?
Things that inspire, that connect you to the faith, that make you realize that you live in community, right? You're going to hear about Thrive. You're going to hear about Fresh Expressions. You're going to hear about some of the great work that laity are doing in and among us. I mean, those are some of the, as we kind of been dreaming about, what does the lineup look like? Our list is long, but, the first Tuesday of every month, we're going to we might have a different guest with us. I'm not going to be here every time.
What?
Yeah, sorry. But I don't have all the stories to tell. I want our people to tell the stories. I want people to sit in this chair who have been impacted by the work of God in and among their communities and in their lives. So my hope is that through the podcast, they'll hear stories that will inspire them, that will give us hope in a world that needs a little hope, frankly, right now. Stories that are relevant to what's happening. We also want to crowdsource. What do people want to hear? Let us know. What is it that you want to talk about? What is it you want us to touch on? So that we are not just sitting here with our list, but I would love to have a list from our audience that will tell us what are the kinds of things that they want to hear about, and how maybe some things that they're dealing with. How does faith intersect with some of the daily challenges that we have, and some of the joys that we get to experience?
You can connect by going to txcumc.org/This Is How We Thrive podcast.
Okay.
Am I correct about that? Our
All
producer says yes. So
Okay.
If you want to connect with us, you have questions, topics you would like for us to discuss, that's how you can do that.
I would imagine Apple, Spotify, all of those things too, maybe? I
Yes,
don't know.
anywhere that you
Okay.
find a
podcast,
podcast
okay.
available, I'm told that's where we will be.
That's great.
So
Perfect.
that is a good thing. I'm excited about this. When you talk about the markers, and first up is clarity. Do you think churches are not real clear about what their purpose is, what they and I think sometimes comparison breeds discontent. So it's easy to look at the big church down the street and say we could never do that.
Right.
But I think there's a version of that every church could do.
Absolutely. I think that there are churches that are pretty clear about who they are.
Okay.
And we could probably name some of those. But even those churches, clarity is not something that's like a one and done, I think. I think it's something you kind of have to continue to hone and sort of rough out and smooth out. But, I wonder, and I've heard the stories of, a small, tiny little rural church that stands at the bus stop every morning and every afternoon with a snack for the kids. That's pretty clear about who they are.
And it's not complicated,
And it's
Bishop.
not hard.
Yeah.
I mean, you go and you buy a bunch of Cheetos and you hand them to kids or cookies or whatever. And that's not hard. But they're clear that they are the church for and with the neighborhood. So taking care of the children. And what's interesting is there's been a pastoral change in that church. And the new pastor is standing at the bus stop handing out snacks. Again, clear. And that's just one little piece of that. But clear that, children in our neighborhood are important to us. It doesn't matter whether they come to Sunday school here or worship here or do whatever here. Children are important to us in this neighborhood. I was in a community in another conference where it's a community with some real challenges with addiction. They've made it clear that at this church, once a week, you're gonna get fed. So 250 people show up for a meal and I asked gently, are there 250 people that live in this community? Yes. So again, it doesn't have to be huge, monumental. Sometimes it is those tiny little acts of love and compassion and grace and kindness that really make a difference. Oh my gosh.
And I was going to add that I think clarity is actually a gift. It's a gift to the church. It's a gift to the leadership. Because as leaders, we know we get asked to do a million different things. And churches are also asked a lot of different ways to support, to partner. But when you're really clear about this is why we exist in this neighborhood, in this century, then that helps you say, yes, that's where we should put our efforts. It also helps you say, no, that's an important, valuable thing, but we're 50 strong and we can't do it all. And you get to really get clear on what is your focus. This word focus, it means one focus. We have turned into foci. We have made it a multiple, and so that you can add 7 things that you're focusing on. No, you have to pick one. What is your one focus? And so that's something that I think is really helpful about getting clear about why do we exist here and now, so that churches can focus and make a real impact. Sometimes I feel like we are digging a bunch of little holes all over the prairie, and I'm like, could we just dig a ditch and get some water going? We could make a real impact in one area if we could start to say no to some of those, not that they're not holes that need to be dug, but we can really get some water
and somebody
going.
else can dig those holes, right? Somebody else
is getting partners in.
So this is how we thrive. Maybe this podcast can point us to this is how we thrive. Whether you're at Kelty's in Lufkin, or you're at Chapelwood in Houston, or Pearland, or Longview, wherever you are, this is how we thrive. And it's our collective thrive, because we do things in community. This is not just how that church thrives and that, but the collection of all of that is how the Texas Annual Conference thrives.
Wow. So, Thea, you've been on podcasts all over the country. What is there? And this topic, these topics have been discussed. What are you taking from those conversations as it relates to other churches across the country?
Yeah, I think people are hungry and they're ready. They're ready for new ideas. They're ready to take new risk. They're ready to find the new opportunities. I think while some are still clinging to, in 2007, things were really working, there's a whole generation ready to live well into the 21st century, to live in the current reality and to meet those people where they are. While church attendance numbers are down for every denomination and everywhere in our country, the desire and seeking for God and faith and reason and purpose and love is on the rise. I just interviewed 4 teenagers for our podcast in Pearland on Monday morning, and their stories of faith, their commitment to community and the benefit that Christian community has brought them as they are 15, 16, 14 years old was so powerful that they were willing to share that story. And I was just, texting all the moms and everyone. I said, the future is faithful. The future is faithful. And if we don't take this opportunity to jump in, to try some new things, to get really clear about who we are and start to live out our witness abundantly, we're going to miss it, because they're going. They are ready. They're eager. They're excited. And so I'm excited that we can take that opportunity too. And I think we're not alone. I think a lot of people are ready for a new way.
So what can those of us, me, a person of a certain age, do to help this youth movement, to inspire, to encourage younger folk to go, grow, and glow?
So something I've learned through podcasting, through leading podcasts, is my job has really been to ask good questions and then be quiet and listen. And so I'm hopeful that this becomes a space where we can ask those good questions and listen. But I think no matter where you are or what age you are, ask good questions. Hold on to that curiosity of Jesus Christ and listen. Listen to what the young people are saying.
Listening, I think, is so key here because some of us did great ministry in 2007. But, one of the things that's been a real highlight for me is meeting with confirmands, meeting with campus people involved in our campus ministries. And one time I just asked, I'm going to be talking to people all over the place. What would you want me to tell them about you? Oh my gosh. And I'd known these people for 5 minutes. I never thought that they would, and 45 minutes later, they were still talking. And so part of it is asking and giving them the space and the safe space to answer those questions. So I'm just, I'm thrilled for this opportunity. And to go walk this journey, Irv, with you and Thea, for your wisdom in all of this. I'm just ready to tell people how we thrive.
Exactly. Well, listen, I think this has been a great conversation. What do you guys think?
I think it's a great start.
5 stars.
Yeah. We got 5 stars. Great. And I think that the conversations are going to get better. And I think at the end of the day, it's all about becoming what God has already said we are, and just learning how to do that in ways that make a difference. And so thank you, Bishop.
Thank you. No better time to be the church than right now.
Exactly. Thank you, Thea. And thank everybody for joining us today. Again, if you want to know more, txcumc.org/This Is How We Thrive podcast. We want to hear from you. We want to talk to you. We want to share with you. So that's it for now. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
You call us to abide in you, the vine where life begins. Through every branch your love flows deep, transforming from within. Rooted in your promise, Lord, we seek to bear good fruit. A thriving faith, a vibrant grace, our lives in you